I'm joined now from Washington by Asad Majeed Khan, Pakistan's ambassador to the United States. Ambassador, thank you very much for joining us here on the program. We're just speaking about some of the tragic events of the last week in Kabul and across the country. But there is an exodus that is taking place, and millions of Afghans are trying to leave the country. What will Pakistan do now to assist as this humanitarian crisis unfolds?
Thank you, Yalda, for having me. Yes, I think our position all along has been that we should encourage and support all Afghan parties to come to a common understanding, because getting to a common understanding and their ability to form an inclusive government would avoid such an exodus. But at the same time, Pakistan has been providing every support that it could to facilitate the evacuation of all those wanting to leave Afghanistan. We have worked with almost 24 countries in facilitating the evacuation of their nationals, and we continue to stay engaged. As of today, almost over 9,000 people have actually transited through Pakistan, and we are still engaged with the international community to facilitate those evacuations.
But what is your actual strategy and policy vis-a-vis Afghanistan when we just talk about the humanitarian side, Ambassador? Because is it that, and we're hearing that Pakistan is saying that we cannot have a flood of people arriving in Pakistan. Of course, you host 3 million Afghans already, but is the policy that you will shut the borders?
Well, we have always we have maintained that Pakistan is home to over 3 million Afghan refugees already, and therefore it is beyond our capacity to host any more refugees. But more importantly, Yalda, it's not just about Pakistan hosting refugees, because if conditions are not conducive in Afghanistan, and if it falls apart and there is a civil war, we are going to see a flood of refugees, not just in Pakistan, but across the region and beyond. And I think that is what demands a more concerted effort by the international community. So far as Pakistan is concerned, as I said, we are helping all those who wish to evacuate, but when it comes to the acceptance of refugees, I'm afraid Pakistan is already overburdened, and we would like other members of the international community to share the burden. But again, I think the best way of helping the situation in Afghanistan is to avert the prospects of a civil war, and the best way to do that is
what is the best way to do that? What is the best way to do that, Ambassador? Because your national security advisor warned to a British paper yesterday that if Afghanistan is forgotten again, we will see the same outcomes as the 90s. What does he mean? And is this Pakistan accepting or legitimizing the Taliban?
No, it's not really a question of legitimizing or trusting Taliban. I think what is really important is the common interests. For now, right now, what Taliban, of course, would want to see peace, not just in Kabul, but around throughout Afghanistan. They would not want to see things completely come apart. I'm sure they are as much interested in avoiding a humanitarian catastrophe in Afghanistan as others in the region do. So I think, and that is true for all Afghan parties. Afghanistan is unfortunately one country, and Afghans are one people who have suffered so much for almost 40 years. And this is really the time and opportunity for international community to come together. I think we owe this to the people of Afghanistan.
Will you hold the Taliban Will you hold the Taliban accountable if there are human rights violations and atrocities?
We are clearly monitoring and following developments in Afghanistan. And I think, Yalda, this is where the international media has a very important role to play in terms of helping international community separate facts from fiction, because there is a lot that is coming out which may not be true. We are also hearing from the ground that things are normal. We are seeing no exodus of Afghan refugees on the border crossings on our border with Afghanistan. We are seeing the restoration of commercial traffic. We are also hearing that situation is, if not entirely normal, but it is close to normal in all the major cities of Afghanistan.
I mean, we are actually, Ambassador, we are getting those reports that there is not the level of human rights violations that people expected, that there are incidents. We have spoken to people who have said the Taliban are going house to house and intimidating people, and there have been revenge attacks in certain parts that we're trying to verify. And I have been speaking regularly to the Taliban, who have said that our policy is no revenge attacks. But given that, and we've serious analysts have come onto this program and talked about the Pakistani military establishment's influence over the Taliban, and that is now no longer an open secret. Will you be talking to them more directly and putting pressure on them when need be? Because in many ways, the international community and leaders I've spoken to from the international community say they expect that from from Pakistan.
Well, again, I think the events of past few weeks would make the assertions that we've been hearing for years now of our linkages with Taliban as, I would say, completely audacious and unfounded, because we can say that successive Afghan governments have used, unfortunately, and our detractors in the region have used that to malign Pakistan and to create those linkages. We do have relationships with Taliban, and you can see, Yalda, today also, Pakistan, no matter what the political orientation of those leaving Afghanistan is, for many, actually, Pakistan still is the destination of choice. So we've been a natural safe haven for all Afghans, and our fate and destinies have been joined, and that is what motivates us to work even harder to secure peace in Afghanistan. We have suffered, 80,000 lives, I think, after Afghanistan. Pakistan is one country, and actually we will suffer even more if this conflict continues, but things are more complicated today than they were before.
And absolutely no one, Ambassador, is denying that Pakistan has suffered from terrorism and terrorist attacks, and many civilians have been killed in Pakistan, and you yourself, your government has a problem with dealing with extremism in the country. However, the Pakistani security establishment has also come out and admitted their influence and control over the Taliban. The Interior Minister of Pakistan said, we treat the Taliban and their families in our hospitals, and we always have done so. Pervez Musharraf, the former president of the country and the army chief, said that we used them as part of our proxy wars. So, those sorts of things have come from Pakistani officials themselves. But I suppose going forward, the question is the kind of influence and perhaps control that you have over the Taliban. You have kept an embassy there. You haven't evacuated your staff. Do you intend on putting pressure on them when need be?
Well, clearly, we are not the only one country that has embassy in Kabul. There are a number of other very important countries that have maintained embassies, and I think as we speak, even United States and Britain is also closely coordinating and working with Taliban on the ground in terms of managing the situation. United States has been in a formal conversation with Taliban for several years now. So it's really one way of looking at it, because to to have a relationship is one thing, but to be to control an entity is something I think is completely baseless. We have always said that we do not control Taliban, and that our leverage and influence has only gone down. But having said that, Yalda, I think this is not the time to point fingers. I think we will have an international community, particularly here in the United States. People will have a lot of time to reflect and introspect and dust up all the reports, cigar reports that came out over the years in pointing out the corruption and inefficiencies and deficiencies in Afghanistan. Now is the time for us to join heads and pool our resources to carry out a clear and accurate assessment of the situation on the ground. What we are seeing so far is that Taliban have, at least so far, demonstrated a clear desire and sensitivity to international community's concerns. And our National Security Committee, you are talking about past statements. I think it is time for you to look at what we are saying today, and our National Security Committee, which is headed by the Prime Minister and which includes the representatives of the armed forces, has very clearly laid out our expectations from Taliban, which is to respect human rights, to not let Afghan territory be used against any country, for all parties to come to a common understanding.